So thank you so much, Sayan. There are no tough questions for you as far as SLET is concerned. I'm sure you'll be able to answer all of them. I would now request Dr. Jayesh, Dr. Manoranjan Das, and Dr. Purvasha to give their comments before we take up the questions on SLET. Jayesh, would you?
Yes, yes. So first of all, as expected, that was an awesome talk. And this is one of the disadvantages of an online platform. I'm sure if we were in a physical meeting, one would hear some great applause. So my congratulations to Dr. Sayan Basu for delivering a talk that is right up there with his standards. Like you would expect in a master class, he has covered practically everything there is to cover about the technique, the indications, when to do it, when not to do it, how to do it, what to do afterwards, and what to expect in terms of results. I really don't think I have any questions in terms of the technique, because once, for example, Sunil Gavaskar explains the intricacies of a cover drive, you don't have much to ask. So I just have a slightly different perspective in terms of a question. A lot of surgeons want to learn SLET because they are inspired by the results and the great results that we show everywhere. So in terms of prerequisites from a surgeon's point of view, what would you recommend? I mean, who should be looking to take up SLET? What should be their level of proficiency? Should it be a comprehensive ophthalmologist, someone who is trained in cornea? And that is number one. What is the skill set required from the surgeon's point of view? And number two, if someone is looking to learn this technique, realistically, how much time should be they willing to invest? And what are the opportunities? Because except for maybe someone doing a long-term fellowship at LVP or Shroff or a senior residency at AIMS, not too many young ophthalmologists are exposed to complex ocular surface disease. So what are the opportunities to learn SLET, and how long should they realistically be looking to invest in terms of their time? And what is the optimal approach if someone wants to learn SLET?
Thanks, Jayesh. I think that's a very, very important question in terms, I would answer it in two ways. I would say that I think all anterior segment surgeons could potentially also be SLET surgeons. But as you rightly alluded to, or partly alluded to, that ocular surface disease is complex, and there are other considerations typically in patients with ocular surface disease, in addition to just the pathology that you see in front of your eye. So I would say it's important, like you mentioned, to get trained, and the opportunities are still not as many as we would like them to be. But it is also important to appreciate that the opportunities are much more now than they used to be before. I think ocular surface has really caught people's imagination. People are interested in learning it, and they understand the difference that they can make to patients' life. I think when we started off 10 years ago, I think the presumption, or the base assumption was that there's not much you can do for these patients. Maybe you try, mostly you fail. But that we have flipped that argument now. We have completely flipped that logic. And now it's mostly, if you know what to do, you can fix many of these patients and really improve their life. So I think that has improved. And like you said, in places like RT Center and at LVP, and even now those people who, I'm sure that the same is true for Shankar Nethralaya or Arvind Eye Hospital and all the other, big places, Nayana Nethralaya, etc., where people are doing. But also, people like you and Purvasha, who are working in comparatively smaller practices, but because you've had the right training, now you are able to not only take care of the patients, but also train more people. So I think that this has been set in motion, and I think that over a period of time, the opportunities for training only will get better and better, and more people will get more and more proficient in this, because there are more and more people who are getting trained and training others. So that kind of ball has been set into motion. But yes, I agree that a little bit of people need to spend some time with those who have more experience in not just doing SLET, but in general ocular surface disease before they start operating. I mean, that opportunity may not, it also depends on what kind of patients you see in your practice. So there are some people who see a lot of ocular surface patients, and therefore I think it's important for them to spend some time at RP Center or at Arvind or Shankar Netralaya or LVPI, and with people who are doing these procedures quite regularly to understand what are the considerations, take practical insights and learn the technique as well. So while the opportunities are increasing, and I think it will get better with time, to answer your question directly, I think that some amount of tapasya is also needed for people who is not as straightforward as a pterygium surgery, just because the underlying pathology is more complex.
Dr. Manoranjan Das.
Yeah, first of all, congratulations, an excellent presentation as expected. And good to know that all of us, we know that you have been practicing in this limbal stem cell transplant from almost like 2010, more than 10 years in LVP. So my question to you is that you have grown through the conjunctival autograft, then cultivated limbal stem cells, then now a simple limbal epithelial transplant. So still, do you think there is a scope of conjunctival autograft over SLET? Point one. Point two, you have been seeing a lot of cases, mostly in our scenario, with children. So when we do in children all this SLET, do you think that we should take some pre-operative or intraoperative or post-operative care so that their post-op complications or sequelae are much less? And third thing that suppose it fails after 3 months or 6 months of time, what we usually expect it to be anatomical or functional success is not there, then how do you recommend to go about the second time? And because one eye is already the same, good eye is already given this almost like 3 clock hours of stem cells, do you advocate the same eye to be again used, or you can ask for the parents or relatives? Thank you.
No, I think those are excellent questions. I'll go one by one. So the first question was about what is the relevance now of conjunctival limbal grafts and SLET? Are they completely redundant now? Is SLET all in all? So I would say that no, there are specific cases in which I would still do a conjunctival limbal autograft over SLET. And these are cases where I know the corneal stroma or the endothelium is also damaged, and I have to combine a limbal transplant and a corneal transplant. And I'll tell you the reason. The reason essentially is that when you do SLET, you put the cells in the mid-peripheral cornea. You can put them closer, but they are most efficacious when you put them in the mid-peripheral cornea because the cells are growing out towards all sides. So they're going towards the center as well as towards the periphery. So that's the advantage of SLET, rapid reepithelialization. But when you do a conjunctival limbal autograft, because you put it at the limbus, and the corneal transplant, particularly a penetrating corneal transplant, still remains a high-risk graft because, the host bed is still vascularized. The patient, you're doing it still in a case where there has been a lot of inflammation before. So it's quite likely that you might have to repeat the graft later on. And then what happens is if you've done a conjunctival limbal graft, you don't have to do anything about the limbal part because that stays in its place. You can change the central corneal graft if that is required. So that is, I would say, the only indication where I would do a conjunctival limbal autograft, where I'm absolutely sure that I'm also going to do a corneal transplantation at the same time if I'm combining or later on. For CLET, I think there is, CLET is very important from a research perspective, and also for those cases where you have the opportunity to do gene editing for the treatment of these kind of congenital limbal stem cell deficiency, like epidermolysis bullosa. So if you look at Graziella Pellegrini's work, I mean, she has done, she's the original, investigator who described the cultivated technique. But a lot of the work that she has done is also in dermatology and in epidermolysis bullosa. And that is fantastic work, because in epidermolysis bullosa, it's a genetic condition, you can't take it from the other eye. And there, if you can grow the cells out in the lab and do gene editing, either, with adenoviral vectors or now with CRISPR, and then transplant the normalized cells on the ocular surface, you can't do that with SLET or with CLAU. So I think there is a limited role, but I think that there's an important role for all techniques. So just like, when we learn cataract surgery, it's good to know ECC and SICS and phaco. But for 99% of our patients, we will be still doing phaco. But once in a while, you will come across a case where the other technique will be applicable. To the second question that you had, and I think that was also a very important question about children, I think it's always good to be more careful in children. I think that's a very, very important point. And thanks for highlighting that. One is I would always do a temporary suture tarsorrhaphy in children so that everything stays in place. I would keep it for a first week or 10 days and remove it by doing an UA, or sometimes patients who are cooperative will allow it to take it off on the slit lamp as well. Not a permanent tarsorrhaphy, but just a suture tarsorrhaphy with 6-0 Vicryl to protect and make sure everything, because children tend to rub their eyes. Parents are trying to put eye drops in their eyes. They might, and you can just give them oral steroids instead of topical steroids for that first 1 week to cover for that. So I would do that. I would also maybe, put 10 or 9 on sutures to secure the amniotic membrane to just make sure that does come. So just be a little bit more careful in children than you would be in adults. And the last question which you asked is also a fantastic question about you did SLED, for some reason it didn't work out. Can you repeat it? So the advantage of another advantage of SLED with over CLAU is that because the size of the biopsy is so small, it is not a problem to go and take another biopsy. That is not the issue. But if you have had a case in which SLED has failed, then it's always a good idea to spend some time thinking what caused this failure. Did I not address the symblepharon? So I'll repeat SLED, sure. But do I also need to do a congenital autograft along with it? Did I miss something the first time? Maybe the eye is dry. Maybe the donor limbus is not healthy. So sometimes you ask the patient, hey, it looks normal, but did you have burns in both eyes to begin with? And sometimes, they'll say that, yes, I had both, but one eye healed. And then okay, maybe, especially adult patients, not so much in children. But adult patients who had bilateral burns to begin with, sometimes the limbus. So you need to look at the limbus in the donor eye and see which area. So I think SLED can be repeated, and it does very well when it is repeated. But I think we should just spend maybe 1 extra minute with the patient trying to understand why it failed in the first place. And maybe if we can do something extra to address that as well, maybe a tarsorrhaphy, maybe a congenital autograft, and then I think that we can ensure that the second SLED is absolutely successful.
Thank you, Sir. Thank you for the great insight. Thank you.
And this question actually was asked by Dr. Rekha Gyanchand also. What is the success rate and how is it different in children and adults?
So this is a very interesting point. There are two issues here. One is that if you look at it theoretically, and it's true also, that the limbus, the donor limbus in children is obviously has a greater proliferative potential than of an adult. So you would expect that when you do SLED in children, it would have better results than in adults because they're younger, the limbus is younger, it should immediately grow and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, at least in our country, and you have to understand that this varies a lot. Like in the West, the causes of limbal stem cell deficiency are very different from what we see in India and other developing countries. Most of our cases are burns, and typically burns in children are not as well managed as in adults for various reasons. It's difficult to examine the amount of burns. Not a lot of places have the facilities to do an examination under anesthesia in the acute stage. Chuna gets retained, which you can't see later on. So while we would expect the results in children to be better, that is to some extent, I think, mitigated by the fact that the injuries that we see in children are also more severe. So why we would expect to see much higher success rates in children, the success rates in children and adults are actually not that different. And I think that is because the degree of severity in children that we see, at least in our country, is also more than in adults.
Urvasha, would you want to give your
Thank you so much, Dr. Sain, for an excellent narrative of this wonderful technique. And it's not just a restorative, but also a regenerative technique, as you have actually proved it to be. And what I would again like to stress upon is the role of acute stage management in these cases, because this is a restorative procedure in the chronic phases. So when do we time it, and what is the role of still the acute stage management of chemical burns? So that should, I think, not be undermined. So if you can just put in a word or two about it.
No, I think that's an excellent point, Purvasha. Thank you for bringing that up. I think to put it in a nutshell, how well you address or treat the acute phase of the burn is, I think, of all the risk factors or all the factors that influence the outcome of SLED, I think that is the most important factor. I think we need to make another effort, and I think that is something that I've been thinking about. So I've been collecting some data and trying to find some strategies. We need to make an effort in improving the overall care of acute ocular surface disorders, which includes both SJS and ocular burns as well. Because what we do in the acute phase ultimately is the greatest prognostic influence, has the greatest prognostic influence on how the SLED is going to turn out to be. And you are absolutely right about that. I think we should do the important things well during acute burns, which is wash, irrigate, remove the chemical, neutralize the pH. If it is very severe, maybe take up for an early amniotic membrane graft, do simple things like a tarsorrhaphy, putting in a bandage lens, and give the patient steroids. I think that's very, very important. I think if we do those things, then the interesting thing here is I think a lot of people feel that by doing all of these things, the eye should come back to normal. Look, that's not going to happen. So we also need to understand why we are treating acute burns. And we are treating acute burns to save the eye so that even in severe burns, we can restore the surface at a later date by doing something like SLED. So I think a lot of people get disappointed when they see, oh, limbal stem cell deficiency developed despite the fact that I did AMG and tarsorrhaphy and gave steroid. That's a good outcome because I can fix that eye later on and it has probably less problems and easier to fix than when, it was not treated or treated suboptimally and now has too many problems associated with the LSCD. So that I think we need to work on a little bit to just increase the awareness in general of why we are treating acute burns, what to expect, and what to do, of course. And your second part of the question, which was on the timing of SLED after acute burns, I think that in general, if you look at overall, I think this is fairly consistent across all geographies, and people would say the same thing, I guess, those who are experienced. I think I'm sure Dr. Namrata would also agree that typically if you are doing SLED in a case that is, 6 months out of the burns later, 1 year later, 2 years later, because everything that has had to happen has already happened. So you know exactly how much the symblepharon is that needs to be corrected. You know exactly what to do. It's a more, and the ocular surface inflammation is not that much. Those are easier surgeries to do and have more predictable outcomes. The earlier, the shorter the gap between the acute burn and SLED, the more unpredictable it becomes because there are so many things that you are not sure about, especially I would say, about the extent of conjunctival damage, which we tend to underestimate in the post-acute phase. That is there, definitely. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the earlier you do, the more difficult the surgery is technically. It bleeds a lot. If you're doing a SLED, you use some Alphagan or, brimonidine before surgery, you can almost do surgery with very, very, very limited bleeding. But if you're doing it in the post-acute stage, 3-4 weeks or 6 weeks out of the burn, the eyes are very inflamed and they're technically difficult to do. So unless you have that experience, you will find yourself in a tough spot because the eyes just bleed so much.
So I think I would also agree with Sayan that the eye has to be, it cannot be hot when you're doing it. It has to be completely white when you're doing it. So later is better rather than doing it earlier. Rajesh, would you want to give your comments? Or?
Yeah, it was an excellent presentation and it had covered everything. So much to ask, but I had a couple of things in mind. Two things actually. One is that the case that you showed that was done in 2011 and it cleared up quite significantly and went on to clear up almost completely. So does it mean that, the keratocytes, the superficial keratocytes that were there, there was no scarring as such, but they were just diseased, and that was the reason, once the epithelium was there, the health of the ocular surface improved, the health of the keratocytes, superficial keratocytes also improved, and that's how it cleared up the corneal stroma, right? The other thing, what I was thinking was that, there are certain cases wherein when you dissect the pannus, you get a thickness, borderline thickness of about 370, 380. In such cases, what would you like to do? Would you like to do a slit, wait for the cornea to clear up and then manage subsequently? Or you would like to, dissect a bit more, remove all the haze and then do a lamellar graft and then combine it with this limbal tissue? What is your take on that?
No, excellent questions, Dr. Asina. The first one is we know biologically there is definitely epithelial to stromal interaction that happens, and a healthy stroma is important for a healthy epithelium and vice versa. Like for example, when we see patients with PED, we know that the epithelium, there's nothing wrong with the limbus or the epithelium, but the epithelium is simply not able to grow over an inflamed stroma. So that's why we try to address the inflammation in the stroma by doing an amniotic membrane graft or giving steroids. And as soon as the stromal inflammation subsides, the epithelium happily grows over. And the same thing happens in SLET also, that you have a abnormal epithelium on the surface, which is drawing vessels and causing inflammation. That definitely disturbs the stromal milieu, even if it is not very damaged or scarred. And once the epithelium is restored, and the normal interactions start between. So I definitely think that, the keratocytes get the right signals. But the only problem with keratocytes is that as opposed to epithelial cells, they are lazy. So the keratocytes work very slowly. The turnover is very slow. So whatever changes are happening in the stroma, they take a lot of time. If we could find a way, I think there is a idea there that if you could find a way in which you could excite the keratocytes to do the same thing quicker, if you can find a way to stimulate them, then we could get faster results.
I think that is also the reason why years after and years later, that little bit of haze that is left after doing SLET clears up so remarkably well.
Right.
We have patients since 2011, and some of them it is difficult to believe that they ever had, when I compare the pictures from what, they were in 2011 to now, it looks like a magical wand. I mean, this limbal lenticule looks like a magical wand. I think I've asked you before, and I'll ask you again.
Presence of there's some evidence of limbal stromal mesenchymal cells also. Maybe that also has a role to play.
Yeah.
So
borderline thickness, wherein what will
yeah. The other question that Professor Sinha asked was on the corneal thickness. I think that I would basically say that there is no harm in trying to just achieve a slightly clearer plane. I think you can go down to about 250 microns or so without any other problems. These corneas do pretty well. I have personally gone down to about even 100 microns or so of stroma, and these patients have done well. The other, the interesting thing here is, and I am again saying this with complete responsibility and not recommending this at all, but sometimes when the corneal thickness, the residual corneal thickness is less, it compensates for the flattening that happens because of the scarring. So the ectasia and the scarring kind of neutralize each other, and their vision, their uncorrected vision improves.
So I was about to say, Sayan, that the dictum that we followed for quite some time was the same as for LASIK. Although in LASIK, you actually make a flap and that weakens the cornea, that if it is 300 microns or less, try not to do it. But then I completely agree with you that now we are going thinner and thinner. Yeah. And I like your, analogy of the fact that, a flattened cornea is neutralized by a ectatic cornea, which comes out of doing this procedure.
But again, it depends on the experience of the surgeon. So many of us who are more experienced will be comfortable in doing that. I think those who are starting out need to be a little bit more conservative.
My cutoff is 280 microns. I don't do less than 280 microns or 300 microns. Sayan is a braver surgeon, and I'm sure.
So only very exceptional cases. I mean, there I have not really had too much of a choice. After you remove the pannus, that's all that is left. So I've not gone deeper, but that's kind of the residual bed that was automatically.
the only fear is that sometimes when you have very thin corneas and you are kind of putting bandage contact lens, all these cases don't have too good a ocular surface also. It's like a compromise situation. The only thing is in some of the cases, the post-op melts, they tend to occur. And like I said, in the earlier days, I was very, you can say, aggressive. I wouldn't, stop until I saw a clear cornea there underneath. But now that less is more. So you tend to do only the cases which you think, which
No, I completely agree. I completely agree. I think because of the two things, one inside that we know that the corneas keep clearing over time, so it's not really necessary at the time of doing surgery to achieve that clarity. And the second, like you very rightly mentioned, the lesser your bed, if there is a delay in healing, the higher the chances that there will be a melt or a complication. So I completely agree that we need to be as conservative as possible.
And Dr. Manoranjan Das?
Yes. Now we also practice the same way. So Sayan has nothing to comment. Is very detailed and precisely told all about limbal stem cell management. And only one thing, probably one more question. When I see you, I feel like asking one more. Just like Dil Mange More. Sayan. So we all dealt with the unilateral cases. Suppose you take a case of bilateral LSCDs, and we don't have any patient's own choice. Suppose in that case, I usually take the cadaveric limbal stem cells. So in what way, and usually I feel it's not successful. What way, any tips you can give me so that that donor harvest or the thickness or the breadth or the size, what is more important for a cadaveric graft transplantation? That will be enough, I think.
No, that's a very good question, and I'm glad that we are talking a little bit towards the end about allogenic slet also. Allogenic slet is a pretty good surgical technique, but the problem is that, like the considerations remain the same. So if you want to achieve a very good outcome, you still have to find a case of bilateral LSCD which has a wet surface, which has good lid function, which is not dry, which has a fairly translucent or relatively clear underlying stroma. And the problem is that it's very difficult to find such cases in bilateral LSCD, because we are looking at either very severe burns, which have a lot of adnexal damage, and the tear film is not good. The underlying stroma is badly damaged. There are other comorbidities like glaucoma, cataract, etc. Or we are looking at more complex cases like Stevens-Johnson syndrome or pemphigoid, where again, it's very difficult to find a case that is wet, that has normal eyelids, good closure, etc. So finding a case that is suitable, ideally suitable for slet is difficult. But if you have such a case, then I think the other important factor that you alluded to, and I think it's very important, is to find the right, if you're doing cadaveric especially, live is the same as autologous, I mean the consideration wise, because you're taking live tissue from if you can take from a relative that's sibling, that's best. But otherwise, if you're taking it from a cadaver, which is also the most common form of allogenic transplant that we do, because it's just more convenient, then it is important to select tissue that is as fresh as possible and also as young as possible. So the younger the donor tissue, typically within 24 hours of harvesting or maximum 48 hours of harvesting, I think where you can clearly see the limbus, on clinical examination of the tissue. Those I think are the requirements of the donor tissue. If you use tissue that has been in preservation for longer, typically because our storage medias are not meant for epithelial preservation, they are meant for endothelial preservation, and endothelium has a very low metabolic demand. Epithelium has a very high metabolic demand. So you will typically lose the epithelial cells or the limbal cells if the tissue has been in storage for 3-4 days. So that's why I would say, as young, I mean, we often don't have the luxury of being able to choose the right kind of cadaveric donor tissue. But if you have that, then that would definitely increase the chances of success.
More so in the COVID times when you have to quarantine the tissue for 48 hours, I think that is a challenge.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, Sayan.
Yeah.
So, okay. So one, Purvasha, what do you think is the next level in SLED?
Just before that, I would just like to ask one more question
Oh,
to
yeah,
Dr.
sure.
Yeah, so when we see that patients or their relatives are very concerned about the condition of the patient and they've been to all sorts of specialists and tried a number of things, and then you ask them to get a transplant done from the normal eye to the diseased eye, how do they react and how do then you counsel them for the procedure? Because it is, I think, a very uh, a painful thing for the relatives as well as the patient and mostly children to undergo. So if you can just put in a word or two about the counseling part for this procedure.
That's a very important point, Professor. This is what I tell patients, that you have had a burn in the eye, because typically these are burn cases, and burns in the eye, they are pathologically similar to burns in the skin. So what happens when the skin burns? The skin crumples up or it sticks to another part of the body, etc. That's the same thing that has happened in the eye. And how do we treat burns? We remove all that scar tissue and we take healthy skin from another part of the body and put it there. And in the eye, we can't put skin, but luckily God has given us two eyes, and you are very lucky that you have the injury only in one eye. It would have been so much more difficult if you had the injury in two eyes. So just like for skin burns, we take skin from another part of the body and put it to restore normalcy to that part. I'm going to take a small amount of tissue from your normal eye so as to restore this. And luckily, you have one good eye. And just like in skin grafts, which does not damage the area from where the graft is taken, it's the same for the eye. It will not cause any harm to the eye. And I will make sure that nothing goes wrong in your normal eye. That is, and typically, because I also in adults and also in children, we don't patch we could do it on a topical. We don't patch the donor eye. So patients have that confidence because they don't have any visual problems immediately after surgery. So they're reassured that yes, everything went well.
Okay, Purvasha, now your last thing that you think is going to happen in the next level. What will be the next level of SLED?
I think for the next level of SLED, I would definitely love to see it not just helping patients with unilateral stem cell deficiency, but something that comes up and which can be useful to the bilateral cases also. Maybe like how we have the amniotic membrane available to us, maybe something like a sheet of cells over it. It could be some bioengineered cells or whatever, so that maybe that could ease life for the bilateral patients also.
Dr. Manoranjan Das?
I think we can use this mini SLED concept for many other cases which you get scarring over the cornea. So I think that we can explore in all unilateral cases where like the simple cases like recurrence of pterygium, those things when you don't have like multiple surgeries done. One case comes in glaucoma, then TRAV, then cataract, then shunt, and then one tube, and still you get this iatrogenic LCDs. So those type of cases, I think we have never utilized the scope of SLED. So I think that should be, we can focus on that so that the ocular surface, instead of having so many surgeries, it will be much better taken care of.
Thank you. Jayesh, what do you think?
Yes. So a lot has been done in SLED, and I'm sure the future holds a lot of promise in terms of both unilateral and bilateral pathology. Unilateral is more or less, we know the results. Bilateral, we still need more data, and I think we will be able to refine our results further. Before we conclude, I would definitely like to ask Dr. Sayan Basu about his thoughts on allogenic SLED in acute burns, because somehow I see more patients having undergone allogenic SLED than autologous SLED when they come to me if they've had SLED before, and I see more of them having gotten it done in the acute phase than in the quiet eye. So what is his thought on it, and what would be the indications where he would use it, if at all?
Thanks, Jayesh. I think for acute burns, if you have very, very severe burns where you are very desperate and you are very desperate to save the eye, particularly in bilateral cases, if you have access to donor corneal tissue, and you're anyways going to do an amniotic membrane and a tenonsplasty and a tarsorrhaphy and giving the patient oral and topical steroids, you might as well throw in a bit of cadaveric limbus because it doesn't hurt. But I think that this logic should not be extended to patients who have milder burns. It should not be extended to patients who do not have very severe burns, because it's unnecessary. And also, this logic should not be extended to say, okay, I don't have access to cadaveric corneal tissue. So in the acute stage, why don't I take some limbus from the healthy eye or limbus from a relative of the patient to treat that? I think that is not correct, and I think that is not advisable. That's why, when we were discussing with Purvasha earlier, and she mentioned the point, I think it's a very valid point that we need to get together and raise more awareness of what are the right things to do during the treatment of acute burns, than focus on what are the desperate things that can be done in exceptional situations. So I think Alloslet in that sense is one of those desperate things that we do in that kind of exceptional situation, not rather than the right thing or the conventional thing to do in that situation. Again, I'm completely against doing autologous SLED or allogenic SLED from a living donor or relative in the acute setting of the burn. I think that should be discouraged, and I think that it is not the right thing to do.
Yeah, I guess any graft should not be subjected to any pre-existing inflammation. So I think that will definitely, affect the outcome.
Rajesh, what do you think is the next level in SLED?
I think the next level, I would say that, as I said earlier, that there should be something to control the growth of the cells, and that will help us to exactly know, because what happens that a cornea person or anybody who is well versed with ocular surface may wait for very long for a cornea to clear up. But as an example showed by Sayan, a case which cleared up, after 7-8 years completely, any other cornea person may like to go ahead and do an anterior laminar keratoplasty, and that will have its own impact. So maybe something which we can, control the growth of these cells, and also the proliferation or the, which may affect the keratocytes as well. Maybe that will take it to the next level, I guess.
No, I think that's an excellent suggestion. I think we need a ROCK inhibitor-like molecule for the corneal epithelium.
So yeah, I was about to say that. Let me say first, and then I will ask Sayan. I think the only surgical part of the SLED should be that we are removing the pannus, and the limbal stem cells should become a medical part of it, and there should be drop-like things so that you just remove the pannus, put a BCL, and then use drops. So I don't know how you would do it, Sayan, and what do you think is going to be the next level of SLED?
No, I think I completely agree that we need to have some kind of a biological or a eye drop-like product where I think on one side we can reduce the dependency on the amount of donor tissue that we are taking. Maybe instead of 1 clock hour, we go to half clock. We've never tested that. We went from 3 to 6 clock hours to 1 clock hour for SLED. But can we achieve the same outcomes in certain cases with even half clock hour of tissue, and supplement the rest with some kind of a medical stimulant to do that? And even to the extreme that you're suggesting, that we remove the pannus, pathological tissue, and we somehow stimulate the limbus in that eye to start producing normal epithelial cells again. And for that, I think we need greater understanding of how the limbus works, what is going on in the limbus that is suffering from limbal stem cell deficiency. Is that permanent or reversible? These are questions that have not been deeply investigated, and I think we have an opportunity to look at that.
So thank you so much, Sayan. I think it was a very interesting masterclass. We could go on, and I think we should have one whole day for SLED, or a SLED workshop on the AIOS platform. We'll request all of you to be a part of it. I would also request your permission to use this class of ours as a FICO module, because for the fellows, because I think that this topic is very appropriate for them, and we covered almost, there was nothing which was left uncovered, yet in such pictorial and such elegant style that, everybody who doesn't know about SLET would, believe it like a magical surgery. So thank you so much, Sayan, for doing this. Thank you, Dr. Manoranjan Das, Dr. Jayesh, and Purvasha, our youngest panelist today. And of course, Dr. Rajesh Sinha, who we've been doing several of these webinars together. We would like to thank our audiovisual team, Dr. Anand and Sharif, and Mr. Kripal Rana for putting it all together. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am, and thanks to all. Particular thanks to Sayan for an excellent and very good answers, appropriate answers to all the queries that we all had. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.